With Harlon Omen. He's chairman of the Colan Group and a former U.S. Navy officer. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Eli Bremer is a Republican strategist and a former officer in the U.S. Air Force. He's joining us from Colorado. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to you both. Harlan, I want to come to you first. Let's talk about the international elements of this. Now, Russia and Ukraine are still attacking each other. The U.S. may be on the brink of a war with Iran, a shaky ceasefire we've got in Gaza. How much do you think the Trump administration is going to want Donald Trump to be focusing on that kind of stuff in the State of the Union address?
This is going to be all show, and Trump is going to have to bluster about how good the economy is and how good things are going. He may make the occasional threat to Iran. The critical issue, in my judgment, one of them, is if he attacks the Supreme Court, will the Supreme stay in state, or will John Roberts, the Chief Justice, walk out? But I think all in all, Trump is going to try and put positive swing on this. He has to, and he's going to try and emphasize the economy. If he gets too far into Iran, he's got a huge problem. One of the things that nobody has mentioned is that Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states have about 4 days' supply of water. And if Iran is attacked and Iran wants to take out the salinization plants and the water supplies, they can throw the Gulf into chaos. And I'm not sure anybody in the administration has made that point known to the president.
Eli Bremer, a few polls recently, and I'm only just quoting a few because, of course, there have been many, suggesting the Trump administration isn't focusing enough on the U.S. economy, and yet Republicans seem to support military action abroad, as long as it doesn't lead to a drawn-out war. How do we square that, particularly when it comes to America First?
Well, good evening, and thanks for having me on tonight. I think that's part of the question, and then the other part is going to be how does he handle that tonight? Trump has spent much of his first year working on international policy and implementing his policy, and he has been arguably fairly successful in implementing his policy. You can argue how successful the policy has been, but he's been effective in prosecuting his policy. I believe what he's going to do tonight is pivot over into domestic and economic issues for the sole reason that this is an election year, and that's what American voters actually vote on. So, I think tonight we're likely to see a pivot on that, and we're likely to see him start prosecuting the case that he can handle the economy and implement changes to the economy that are going to help Americans this election year.
Harlan, let's talk about the tariffs. Of course, he had this blow with regard to the Supreme Court. Doesn't seem to have fazed the Trump administration very much. Now, the critics of the tariffs have said that he is essentially weaponizing tariffs in order to take action against foreign governments that he disagrees with. And yet, of course, there is an impact with voters at home. How do you think, again, he might try to address that in tonight's speech?
Well, that's when he may turn against the Supreme Court. And remember, the problem for Trump is, will he go off speech and allow his mouth to dictate what he's saying rather than a more thoughtful script? Look, the tariffs are clearly unconstitutional and illegal. He's ignoring the court. He's trying to go to these workarounds, which are very, very limited in terms of the need for analyses and duration of having them imposed. But he really can't do that. And the court's findings, in my judgment, were too narrow. They should have said he does not have the authority, period. The fact of the matter is the Supreme Court does not have a police force and does not have an army, and Trump can ignore them. And so I think he's going to make the case that his tariffs are really good things, how they're going to kick in, how they're going to restore the debt and level the debt, and how these are really good for America, when the fact of the matter is the majority of Americans know that's not true. But Trump is a showman. He's going to point to people in the upper balcony. He probably has the American hockey team back from Italy where they had a great victory. This is pure show. And the substance is going to be less important. Trump is going to try and sell the economy. But if he goes off script, it could be explosive. And this will be, as I said, theater, not a really serious talk.
Eli, you're a Republican strategist, and we're running up to the midterms. OK, there's several months out, but they're still there on the horizon. Trump's personal polling is low. There's a lot of polling generally, as far as the administration and policies are concerned, not in great shape. What would you not want to hear from him in this speech?
Well, I'll agree with my colleague. I think if he goes off script, that's probably not a good sign. On the other hand, what I will look for to say if this is a success is to forecast things that they have done predominantly in the Big Beautiful Bill last summer that are going to start kicking in and putting more money in Americans' pockets. Affordability is a major issue in America, and it's one that's hurt Trump in the polling. But polling is not static; it changes, and Americans will start kind of making up their minds on the midterm elections this summer. So he's got about 5 months to really fix that before it'll impact the midterm elections. He's got some policies out there that I think people are going to really like once they take effect. He's done a lot of work to bring down prescription drug prices. You've got Social Security no longer being taxed. That's going to put a lot of money back in elderly people's pockets. And then he's got no tax on tips. So that's a good working class tidbit. So I think for him to be successful, he needs to broadcast his vision for that and tell people that he did that and that that's going to put more money in their pocket. I agree with my fellow guests. If he goes off script, if they start talking about foreign wars and the parts of the first term that have not been so popular, then that's going to be a little more difficult for him to sell to the American people tonight.
Harlan, I mean, some Americans are said to be convinced that they have a good message to put forward on the economy. The Democrats, of course, thought that prior to the last presidential election as well, and we know how that worked out for them. How would you want Trump to convince voters that he does actually understand the kind of pain that many Americans are going through at the moment?
I don't think Trump is capable of doing that. He's a showman, and he's going to get in front of the Congress. He's going to get in front of 30 or 40 million viewers, and he's going to go off script. And if he goes off script and says, I actually won the election in 2020, this could be a disaster. What Eli says is absolutely right. I do not agree with the message, but the message is we have all these things in place. They're going to kick in June, July, before the elections. He has, if not a solid case, a case that Americans could understand, even though I don't think they're going to lead to the benefits economically. But I don't believe that Trump is capable of disciplining himself. And that's why I think tonight's going to be a show. And I suspect that Trump is going to end up embarrassing himself if he goes off message, which I suspect he will.
Eli, if what Harlan says is correct and he does go off message and it does start to resonate and he goes off into areas that the Republican Party would not want him to go close to, what kind of an impact do you think that might have on the midterms? Is it the case that people are already decided about Donald Trump, or does this have the capacity to change minds?
Well, I think this will sort of set the tone going forward. I think the president and Republicans have 4 to 6 months to really change the messaging and change the momentum. And elections are a lot about momentum. And so I think that if he sets the tone correctly, he can do that. American politics have largely also devolved purely into tribalism, and that provides an opportunity and a threat. So like my colleague said, if the president goes off script into an area where the Democrats can exploit it, that will cause a problem. If he stays on topic of things that there's large agreement with, for instance, men competing in women's sports, the no tax on tips, lowering prescription drug prices, the Democrats are going to be probably boxed in and have to find a way to oppose what are wildly popular parts of the Trump agenda. So I think that's what I'll be looking for tonight, is to see how that goes off. President Trump has a tendency to go off script. Sometimes that works for him and sometimes it doesn't. So that's definitely a thing to watch tonight.
Harlan, you mentioned before that we were discussing about the U.S. building its military forces towards Iran. Now, give us an indication, first of all, of what your interpretation is of how that is relating to voters in the U.S., but also tell us what your assessment is of how that could play out and what may happen to the Trump administration in the event that this does actually become a shooting war.
First, I would say if the election were held today, the Democrats would probably sweep both houses, but who knows what's going to happen. So what happens tonight is not really going to affect the election unless Trump implodes, which he will not. The problem is, even though we have 2 carrier battle groups in the vicinity, one in the Mediterranean so far and one in the Persian Gulf, this is not an armada that has a lot of staying power. The amount of its ability to do real damage over the long term is very limited. And people do not understand that while the notion of 2 big aircraft carriers with 80 airplanes on board is a powerful force, the logistics and the sustainability of that force are in question. And there were articles in the newspaper that suggested that the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff was quite concerned about the sustainability of a longer term operation. Further, the Iranians have a way of exerting leverage. As I said, the water supplies in the Gulf are hugely vulnerable. The oil rigs, the oil capacity. Iran can strike Saudi Arabia. They can strike the Emirates. They can try and close the Gulf. There are little things that we can do to respond to that, but you could see an oil crisis. So if Trump decides he's going to have a one-time rate only, as Midnight Hammer was, I think that will just rile up the Iranians, and they can retaliate in ways that I think we have not considered fully, because they are still a very potent force. And do not forget, Iranians are Persians. The Persian personality is one that does not like to be pushed around. It does not tolerate that, and it can get their hackles up very quickly. And I think sometimes we discredit that.
Eli, we are at a point now where there are several thousand American military personnel who are very close to Iran. And the Trump administration has always made a point of saying they will never put American boots on the ground. Now, Venezuela, possibly, arguably, is a point when they did exactly that. That was special forces. But this, we're talking about regular troops. We're talking about regular sailors. How much of a risk is the Trump administration taking in the event that there is the possibility, of course, that American service personnel could be injured or killed if it comes to a conflict with Iran, when it comes to the U.S. voters?
Well, I think that it's unlikely that this would be a popular position with American voters, especially there's a large swath of President Trump's base that would find that very disconcerting. But that being said, President Trump is nothing if not extremely unpredictable and extremely unconventional. And we saw that, I think, in Venezuela, where it wasn't just the military operations, it's how they handled the country after the operation that, frankly, I found quite stunning and unconventional. So we can look at historically how the U.S. has conducted these raids, but President Trump's administration is being run by an entirely different group of policymakers who have a much more wide open playbook. And so I think that there's an opportunity for a much different set of operations that the U.S. could conduct in Iran than what we've experienced in the last 25 years with U.S. operations in the Middle East. I think that could be economic in nature. It could be diplomatic, and it absolutely still could be militarily, but probably not a full-on invasion.
Eli Bremer, Harlon Omen, we appreciate you both being with us on Al Jazeera. Thank you very much indeed.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news, expert insight. Like, share, stay ahead.